Hi, I'm Scott Shelton, and welcome to this episode of Winegazer. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm really happy and honored to be sitting here with my guest, Morgan Clendenen of Cold Heaven Cellars. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for having me here in your cellar.
Thanks for coming. No, I love it when people actually come to me instead of me having to go to them. So it's great.
Awesome. So I figured we'd start with a couple just, background questions. Like, how did you get into wine? Was it something that was part of your family? Did you grow up with a family who drank wine, or was it something that you discovered later on in life?
Well, actually, I grew up in a family that was very religious and didn't drink wine. They didn't even drink caffeinated beverages. And
Wow.
but my dad was sort of the black sheep of the family, and I remember him drinking a little bit of wine, but no, was probably working in fine dining in high school and college that really turned me on to wine. But my dad had a spring water company, and when I was a kid, we used to have tastings when he was deciding whether he had a marketable product. Was to have blind tastings of water. So when I was a kid, I used to do blind tastings of water because he would lay all the glasses out, and it would all be the same level, all the same kind of glass, and then he would unveil all the different waters the way you do wine tastings a lot of times. So when I started getting interested in wine and started going to wine tastings, it just was sort of felt kind of like something I'd done already, but a little bit easier. There's actually things to smell in a glass of wine, and there are in water. There are things that you notice in water too, but it's just something you become attuned to.
So do you have any infamous aroma or taste descriptors from your history of sampling bottled water that?
Yeah, I find that sweet. It seems to be more in the palate, far more in the palate than it is in the nose. Although I've had some off. I won't name any waters because I was actually on a marketing thing where I was paid to be a water taster and having to sign some confidentiality kind of things. But there was some waters actually smelled like lagoon, like a lagoon might.
Wow.
So, but the descriptors are, I would say, more like sweet, astringent, heavy. Some waters can be light and heavy. The amount of minerals in them, so they can have a slight saltier taste. So yeah,
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Was there one bottle of wine when you were working at the restaurants and involved that you just wow, there's just something, I just had an epiphany. This is just something that opened my eyes and kind of was.
It was a port.
Turned a corner for
yes.
It was a port.
63 wares port. That's what it was, the beginning of the downfall. I worked at a high-end restaurant at the time, and we had this port that occasionally would come down, and it was expensive, and it was a big deal. And I remember I never got to do it, but I remember watching the maitre d', who was the manager of this restaurant, go through with the wine professional and taste all the wines and decide. And we carried this awful George de Boeuf, who I shouldn't name any names, but
we can beat that out later.
That smell takes me back to a place in time that I didn't mind being, but I don't want to drink that, So, and then just getting older and getting a little more sophisticated, or thinking I was, and traveling to Europe, and wine being so part of the culture there, and that sort of thing. When I graduated from high school, I went to Europe for the summer and bummed around, and one of my friends took me to Épernay for my 18th birthday, which is the center of Champagne. So we went to all these great champagne houses, and that, those kind of little steps are what took me to where I kind of am today.
Very cool. I think we should start with the wine now. With you,
Sure.
I'm kind of thirsty.
Yeah.
What do you got here to start with?
Well, as you probably know, we're better known for our Viognier. I'm just gonna. I know it's a screw cap, but I guess it's
Old habits die hard.
old habits die hard kind of thing. So this is one of the many Viogniers we actually produce, and that's what we're known for. Viognier, but we are really trying to strike a presence in the Pinot Noir market. I love Pinot Noir. The whole premise behind Cold Heaven was to make cool climate Viognier. And while that's a great thing to do, there's just not a lot of vineyards planted to this varietal that are in a cool climate. Most of them, I would say, probably 95% of the Viognier planted in California is in a pretty warm climate.
So is that kind of why a lot of the Viogniers that I've had in the past seem kind of flabby?
Very different compared to Cold Heaven?
Yeah, I mean, they're just,
Yes.
I don't know, it doesn't seem like there are a lot of people that are really doing them extraordinarily well in California. And do you think that's more of where they're growing the grapes or more of the way they're treating it in the winemaking?
I think a lot of it is where they're growing the grapes, quite honestly, because I've found, and I've been doing this since '96, so for a long time, and I've worked with warmer climates, and this is in fact the warmest climate Viognier that we make.
This one right here.
This is the Santa Ynez Valley Viognier, and the yellow label, screw cap. It's meant to be consumed young. I put a screw cap on it to kind of give that essence that it's not something to lay down. I don't promote aging of Viognier, really. I like fresh fruit flavors, so but some people do. And in Condrieu, I noticed that they tend to go for this style, and they like to have a certain amount of kind of maturity. They don't mind that style.
Right.
And that's fine, but for me, for what I like to drink, I say drink it young.
Yeah.
Although, as you get in and you taste the wines, you'll understand the progression of why these wines would lay down and why they would age well. And that's that cool climate, that higher acidity. That acidity really lets those wines age much longer than you would typical California Viognier.
Yeah, the acidity would definitely be the key to being able to lay them down. I agree. This wine we're having right now, is this multi-vineyard or is it come from one particular vineyard?
It's one vineyard. Actually, all three of the Viogniers are single vineyard. This is Curtis Winery had a planting, and the reason I like this is it's a particular clone of Viognier I call it our clone, because supposedly Randall Graham, it's a suitcase clone that Randall Graham snuck in to be as Roussanne. He told everybody it was Roussanne, it got propagated as Roussanne, the nursery sold it, and people planted it as Roussanne. And when it started to produce grapes, Roussanne looks very different than Viognier. Roussanne,
the grapes themselves?
Yes. It has kind of a russet color. So when it started producing grapes, it was like, this doesn't look like what we know Roussanne to be.
So you're like, wait a minute, this is something different.
It didn't happen to me.
Okay.
I don't own any vineyards. I've been a part of planting some of the vineyards that you'll taste, and one of them is family owned. But as far as this particular clone, I didn't discover it until I was already making Viognier. And some people called me up and said, hey, we have this clone that we planted. We thought it was Roussanne. Nobody wants to buy it. I said, sure, I'll try it. And I really like it because it holds its acidity in a warm climate better than the Davis clone that I've worked with out at Sanford and Benedict. And I really have only worked with Davis clone in a warm climate. And I just find as those sugars develop where you get the flavors, the acidity drops. And so you get this kind of flabby, very perfumed and very flavorful wine, but it doesn't have that acidity that you need, for me personally, that makes a wine balanced. I mean, food doesn't taste good unless it has the right amount of salt. I don't care what you do. And that salt balance is kind of what acidity is to wine. It's a very strong equation. And that actually makes it also, that acidity makes a wine very good with food and makes it, a good pairing. Whereas Viognier for a long time had a reputation of being an unfood-friendly wine. It was an aperitif wine. Right. Whereas these wines would just go really great with anything that you could have that would be spicy. Any ethnic food, whether it's Indian or Mexican or Asian or Thai, those spicy qualities, and people who don't want beer, because beer is really filling. I like beer. It takes a lot of beer to make wine.
It's like the third time I've heard that.
I want to say it's true. It's true, and it takes a lot of tequila too. But it makes for wines that go with food, and I really do make wines for my own palate, because more than anybody else in this world, I have to drink more of my own wine, and so I need to make something I like, because I feel like if I like it, I can find enough people that agree with me.
It's also great if you're selling a product to have something that you love 100%, that you really, your heart is in it, that you're not just selling it to make money, but you're sharing it with people because you know it's something that's dear to you and that you feel good about it.
Well, that's an interesting idea, because when I first got into making Viognier, I didn't have a particular love for it. In fact, I didn't think anybody was doing it particularly well. And so...
is that why you got into it? Pardon me for interrupting.
Yes.
Is because that you're saying, oh, nobody's really doing this right. I can do it better than anybody else is doing this.
Viognier seemed to be sort of an afterthought. There were a couple wineries that had actually started their wineries on that grape. John Alban was one, and Andrew Murray was another. They thought that this was the grape. They're going to start their winery based on this grape, but Viognier is such a, they talk about Pinot Noir being the heartbreak grape. Viognier, I think, is much more difficult, because it's such a balance of your site, your clonal selection, and then what you do with it in the cellar once you get it there. And a lot of people, thought we'll put a lot of oak on it. Viognier, I find in California, it just kind of serves up oak. So new oak is not always, it's something as far as the Cold Heaven label, we don't use any new oak. We're trying to use neutral French oak barrels. Sorry, neutral, because I'm not looking for that oak flavor, but I'm trying to round out my acidities. I usually have such high acidities that I'm doing things like doing full malolactic in barrel to kind of round that out.
Like if you did in the stainless steel, it would just be too much acidity. It'd be you need that oak to kind of...
Well, I think that what happens is you don't get sort of those wood tannins, and a light wood tannin with this grape is a good thing. And wood tannins are the things that, one of the things of wines that mature. That's why, when you have a lot of red wines, you see in that way, and you also see it more in sort of white burgundies. Those wood tannins really mature and change over time, that make those wines different and make them special and make them really delicious.
Right.
So I was looking for something like that, but not to be heavy-handed with it. So the wine I just poured you is the second in the lineup. This is Le Bon Climat Vineyard. This was planted by my ex-husband and I in '98. And it's planted in the Santa Maria area, Santa Maria AVA, and it's farmed organically. The site is an ancient riverbed, so it's a lot of sandy, small rocks area. Very different from Sanford and Benedict, where there's a lot more calcareous soils. Okay. This is actually a clone of Viognier from Chateau Gruyère, so I call it Chateau Gruyère clone. That clone selection tends to give you more of the floral notes of Viognier, and a lot of minerality.
I was going to say that I'm really picking up a lot more minerality on the aromas versus the first one.
Right, and you get a lot of that vanilla, and a lot of people think that's coming from the barrel, but that's a natural aromatic component of Viognier.
It almost, to me, smells different than like the kind of vanilla characteristics you would get from like a heavily oaked Cabernet Sauvignon.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, it's kind of apples and oranges, so to speak, in my opinion.
So a lot of honeysuckle and orange flower, and then, on the palate, you still get those stone fruits, which are very much, what define Viognier. So that nectarine, that peach, apricot, and sometimes as it starts to mature, you're starting to get more of those honey notes. So very classic in a lot of ways of how Viognier is supposed to be, but I think a lot of people get confused about what Viognier is supposed to taste like out of California because it's been so heavy-handed. And I don't blame the people who make it. I think they're just, like I said before, I think they're planted into warmer areas. So those alcohols come out, the acidity is knocked out. So you get a kind of different beast.
Are they treating it like more like Chardonnay in some aspects? Like thinking like, oh, we can just make it like Chard? I
think a lot of people do because for a lot of people who are making things like Syrah, they want to add a white to their lineup.
Yeah.
They want to add some Viognier. Oh, we can get some Viognier from this place over here. How do you make Viognier? What makes, you know, I don't know how to say that. I mean, I know what I do. I don't know what they're doing. How about that?
Right.
But I do see a lot more stainless steel coming out of those areas. I see a lot more. Yeah, and because they're trying to preserve that acid, what little they have, so they will block the malolactic and keep the malic, so it'll appear brighter. And then they also will acidulate, so adding acid to the wines. Typically, we just don't have to do that with cool climate stuff.
Where you're growing the grapes, you have enough natural acidity.
And I've had some years where it's just been eye-popping. And especially the Sanford and Benedict, it is the slowest wine to come around, but when it does, it's like the shy child that you stick on stage and suddenly it sings, dare I say it, a Whitney Houston song.
That was great.
It just would be topical.
It's getting kind of old on the news. So do you treat the different Viogniers pretty much the same in terms of like how much time they're spent or interlope or different recipes for like what kind of yeast you use, or do you kind of have like a formula, or do you treat each one independently?
I have with the warmer climate stuff tried some Sauvignon Blanc yeasts in the past to kind of give it more of the raciness, or try to achieve more raciness with that. But with the Sanford and Benedict and the Le Bon Clément that we're tasting, I use a champagne yeast because I'm trying to really get the most clean expression of that grape from that vineyard. I don't want to add a floral or fruit, or I don't need to work on preserving the acidity. I need to work on figuring out how to round it out with these two vineyards.
So that kind of answers my question in terms of why you don't make a blend, whether all single vineyard. You're trying to make that expression from each vineyard.
Well, I think what it was in the beginning, you know, I learned my craft at ABC, Bon Clément. Jim did so many single vineyard Chardonnays and single vineyard Pinot Noirs, and so that philosophy certainly made sense to me because you want an expression of that vineyard. But I have to say, when I was pregnant with my daughter, who is now almost 17, and I couldn't stand the taste of wine, I was still in the wine business, and my ex-husband kept try this vineyard, and I go, it's too this, it's too that, it's too this. And finally he comes home one day and he goes, try this. And I said, this is the perfect wine. And he goes, it's a blend of the 5 best vineyards from 5 best barrels from the 5 best vineyards. And that's how Isabel from Morgan Clendenen was actually, how that came to be actually a blend. And so I'm not opposed to blending, but by the same token, for the Viogniers, I could make one giant Viognier, but they're so different that I kind of like the way each one of them expresses itself individually, and I like the fact that while one's like being really good, the other one's being bad, you know, one will decide, they're like children, you know.
Personalities.
Yes, exactly. You know, you have one that's going to be good while the other one misbehaves, and suddenly just when, it's kind of, it keeps it interesting for me too, I have to say.
That's wonderful. That is really delicious.
Thank you. It's really the first to show. I mean, the Sentinez Valley people really like that for its aromatics, but this one, once it kind of comes out of the gate really fast. Now the Sanford and Benedict, it takes its sweet time. The wonderful thing about this particular vineyard that really sets it apart from everything else that I do is that it loves air. And I should have probably opened it while we were talking, and I just wasn't thinking about it. It is just a wine that gets better and better with each glass.
It's
Very
funny.
unusual.
Yeah, because people, they generally don't think like, oh, maybe this white wine, I should open up and let it sit for a little while before I drink it. People are more accustomed, I think, to do that with red wine. It's like, oh, I'll decant this Cabernet for an hour before I drink it. But people don't really think, oh, maybe this white wine I should let sit for a little while. They just crack it open and hit it.
I oftentimes, when I'm at public tastings where I don't have a chance to do that, I will decant this wine. And everybody thinks I'm crazy. And I'm like, okay, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm crazy. Well, I'm in the wine business, so that automatically gives me the stamp of
Crazy?
craziness. Yes, exactly.
So what is this one that you just poured for us?
So this is the Sanford Benedict, what we were talking about. These are almost 30-year-old vines, which is pretty old for California. This was the first wine I ever started making. I started with just making this wine and grew it because I'm not a trained winemaker. You know, I didn't go to school to learn winemaking. I learned everything hands-on, tasting, smelling. And after doing it for over 15 years, you know, you certainly fall in a niche where you know what things and at the stages are that they are in the barrels. You know, I might taste Sanford and Benedict in barrel right now and it'll be shrill and difficult. But I know where it's going. It'll show a lot of grapefruit tones and kind of be a little bit disjointed and sharp. But after years and years of working with this vineyard, I know what it gives me on the other side.
That's like the kind of thing you can't really teach somebody so easily. You just have to learn from experience, I would think.
Well, I think that that's kind of where women really stand apart in the wine business because we have the ability to have a better sense of smell and oftentimes a better sense of taste. Often to our detriment because at certain times, like when I was pregnant, all I could taste was alcohol. I mean, it just, the smell of wine was the biggest turnoff. And that was those were really trying times. You know, and with my son, I tried to actually time him so that I wouldn't lose my palate during the most crucial timing. Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing.
And it worked. Believe it or not, it was one of the few things. He was like, boom. Okay, we want to have a baby, and 9 months later there was a baby.
So besides the maternal challenges of a female winemaker, what other challenges, I'm just curious, have you come across, if any, being a woman in this field?
Physical strength. I think just being able to live brute freaking force. I only have so much of it. And as I get older, I realize I'm only going to ever have so much of it.
Right.
So I think that's my biggest problem. I've been doing this for so long that the male-female, the other aspects of the male-female winemaker don't really come into play. I don't feel like there's any prejudice or cattiness. And actually, most of the women I know in the wine business are really supportive of one another.
That's awesome.
We know each other's pain, you know, and we know what it's, you know, the forklift is your best friend. You can do, as long as you've got a forklift.
So how did you decide to become a winemaker? I know you said you didn't actually go to school and train to be one, but what was the point, the turning point where you said, like, I want to become a winemaker?
Well, I kind of always saw myself, when I got in the wine business, I'd always have these visions of myself being in a vineyard. Not in a dark cellar surrounded by barrels, actually. Not at all like this. And I just always really liked wine. And I could sell wine. I started on the sales end. I worked for a distributor and moved to Napa. I worked for a winery in Napa. And had a hand in harvest and, thought the chemistry aspect of winemaking was pretty fun. My dad was a chemistry teacher. And so that felt kind of cool and normal and natural, I guess.
With a nerdy twist on it?
Yeah, and then you have to be in the vineyard to some degree, even if you don't own vineyards, because you got to watch your grapes. So those last few months coming up to harvest, you're really looking at things and tasting things. And quite honestly, I guess really, I just got tired of doing it for somebody else. I thought if I want to go out and sell something, I want to do it for me, and then I'm not trying to sell somebody else's idea.
Was it
something?
Did you run into things where it was a creative problem, like where a musician will say like, "Stupid record company, he wants me to play this, but I want to play this." Was it like you wanted to do something else in the cellar, and they were telling you, "We want you to make this kind of wine," or it wasn't really at that point?
No, but when I came in, when I moved down here, and Bon Clément has been around for a long time, very set in its ways. And I really didn't know, I didn't really have a place for myself other than either, at that time they were allocated and had a mailing, they were sold out.
Right.
There was they didn't need anybody's help to sell that wine. They weren't big enough at that point in time where there was a constant marketing theme. So basically I was like, what would I really want to do? And so I thought, I want to learn how to make wine. And fussed and fought until I got my way.
Persistence.
Well, I think anything you really want to do, you ultimately do.
Yeah, that's true.
So I just think I found myself in a place where this was really what I wanted to do. Now I'm ready to do something else.
I'm amazed so far by the finish on these wines. Very long finish.
It's
nice
like you ate
mouthfeel.
a peach, kind of a slightly unripe peach, like 20 minutes ago.
Right, you can still taste it even. I just 20 seconds later, I'm still.
That
tasting it.
Sanford and Benedict has the longest finish.
Mm-hmm.
And now we only bottled that wine. This is 2010. Everybody has already gotten their 2010 Viogniers in bottle, probably by June at the latest. And I remember I posted something on Facebook that I was bottling Viognier in November, and somebody said, "Isn't that really late?" And I was like, "Not if you're dealing with what I'm dealing with." That's how specific what I do is, and that's what sets Cold Heaven apart from just about the rest of the pack. Now there are some other people making cooler climate and higher acidity, more structured kind of Viogniers, but I don't find them consistently.
I'm just curious, how did you come up with the name Cold Heaven Cellars?
I've told this story so many times, I feel like I'm so unoriginal telling it. I was actually looking for something to kind of remind me of my past, that when I first got in the wine business, how unjaded and happy I was about it. Mm-hmm. And, the thrill of getting together with a group of friends and everybody bringing out a special bottle of wine. I'm trying to remember that. And I was at a dinner party, and very early in my career, chefs, wine people, everybody, brought their special wine out, trying to outdo one another. And this guy leans over to me. He was a buyer for a wine merchant at the time, and he recited a Yeats poem in my ear. It was kind of like one of those surreal moments, because he certainly had my attention. He was whispering this thing. It's the old and gray and full asleep, nodding by the fire. Take down this book and slowly read and dream of the look your eyes had once and of their shadows deep. So in other words, he was actually making me remember this moment in time. Mm-hmm. And so I went to Yeats, and Yeats had this horrible poem called The Cold Heaven, but I thought it was a great name, so I decided to use that. But it was a Yeats poem that sort of takes me back to that moment in time. You think of that how wine has been perceived with poetry and beauty and the good life. It's sure you have those for the alcoholic in all of us, but but when you think of wine, I don't think of a dirty bum on the side of the street drinking out of a bag. I think that I always want to imagine that he's drinking Everclear, okay? Not wine.
So, what's the difference, in your opinion, between the Viogniers being made here versus France in terms of climate and soil? What are the differences between the kind of soil types and the climate?
Well, first of all, you're dealing with geographically very, very different layouts and how those vineyards are. As far as soil contents, there's a lot of calcareous soils in that area, and it's very rocky in Condrieu. But you're dealing with vineyards that are on, steep slopes.
Mm-hmm.
The physical act of actually getting those grapes is, I would quit winemaking after about a year or two. Screw this. This is, because you're physically having to take grapes down in baskets on people's backs.
Oh, yeah.
Or up wherever the tractor can get into.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have these vineyards on really steep slopes, so you have really ripe stuff on top that's getting most of the heat and sun. Then that middle stuff is sort of perfect, and that stuff at the bottom is green. And so, those are very different challenges to the gentle, rolling hill nature that we have in California. After one harvest, 2004 in Condrieu, and I lost 10 pounds in a week from the level of physical activity.
Right. Wow.
It's just not the same here. As far as soil contents, they vary from what I have in Santa Maria is different than what I have in Santa Rita Hills.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, you still know that that's Viognier in your glass. It's not an abomination of something. So I will fend off my ignorance of soil contents, of where those places are, because I'm here. These are the places it doesn't really matter what the soil contents are for me. I like those grapes. I'm going to continue to make those wines as long as I can. But when that was the biggest difference in those vineyards to me, when you see how those vines have to struggle in France, and how rocky those soils are versus what we have here, it's just night and day.
Yeah, because the soils here seem more, just more nutrients in them. They seem like more soil as we know it, where a lot of the vineyards in France, when you look at them, you can't even really see soil on the surface.
It's
like
true.
Rock.
It's
it looks
true.
so different.
One of Clairon's vineyards is just, I took a picture, in fact, there's a picture up there, and it's just rocks. And they built a wall, and I'm like, where'd you get the rocks? I go, oh, we just picked them up, and make a wall here.
So this one has a different label, a different looking label compared to the first three.
Right.
What's
This
the story
is
on that?
this is the last Saints and Sinners we're going to do for a while. I just haven't had the crop quantity to do a separate label. This is basically my grapes. This is Sanford and Benedict grapes, but done in Clairon style. So he uses native yeast, so we let it go natural. We don't inoculate that. We use a considerable amount of new oak. We do a batonnage, a stirring of the leaves regime, and what that does is slightly aerate those yeast cells. This is the way Eve has told me. And that gives it just enough air to keep the yeast cells happy without oxidating the wine. Because what I find in Viognier is you can get reductiveness very easily, and I find we have much less problems with reductive properties when we do batonnage. I don't believe it makes the wine richer or more intense. I think it just keeps a healthy balance for those yeast cells.
So when you say native yeast, that is the natural occurring yeast in the environment of the cellar for people who...
No, actually what it is and you can actually make your own yeast culture for breads. And what it is it's the yeast that is in the environment in the vineyards that is on the skin of the grapes.
Interesting.
I don't like to do it very much for white wine. It makes me nervous because the contact with the skins for white grapes is very different than red grapes with the juice.
Right.
You take the white grapes, you press them, the juice goes off on its own. You don't leave it on, or we don't leave it on the skins. Whereas with red grapes, it's percolating in there for a couple weeks, so it gets a lot more of the natural yeast than I think the whites do. And so I've had some, not with this vintage, and not, I think it was 2006 maybe, we had some stuck fermentations because there were natural yeasts. And I said to Eve, do you ever get stuck? Oh, sure. Or, we make sure we work with that. And for me, I would prefer, the less I have to do to a wine, the better I feel about it. It just feels more natural. It doesn't feel manipulated. It's like when you go to a fancy restaurant and you get this thing that has 15 different vegetables in it, and you just feel like it's been touched so much that the flavor has gone out of it. That's how I feel about wine. I don't want to do that. And the less you have to manipulate it, the better it is for the wine.
That's great.
So this has that, you really get the oak in the nose. But
For
it's
sure.
really nice. It doesn't sit up like an oak board, like you're standing out in the middle of a lumber yard.
It's funny too. I'm getting an interesting on the palate, like almost like a puffed corn, like sweet cereal, almost like a little bit of a grainy, sweet.
And it's totally dry.
Yeah.
That's just the fruit forwardness of Viognier. A lot of people, it's so intense for them that they go, oh, that's a really sweet wine. I don't like sweet wines. And I'll go, it's bone dry. And I've had people argue with me, and I'm like, I would tell you if it had residual sugar in it. But really what I try to do is pick at a sugar level where I know I'm going to have a full fermentation, where I'm not going to be left with residual sugar. Because that means with residual sugar that you're going to have to filter the wine, and you're going to have to remove that to put it in a bottle. The less I have to do, the better that wine is to me.
The floral aromas on these wines, they're pretty outstanding. I mean, they're like, you hear the term like fruit bomb. These are almost like flower bombs. In a good way. I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean, it's like an explosion of just wonderful flower aromas that you don't really find in a lot of other types of wines.
This is a 2009. And how fresh is that wine?
I mean, it's amazingly fresh.
Amazingly fresh. And then we bottled this the same time as the 2010 Sanford Benedict. And it was a little bit disjointed. It got mad that it was being bottled. And how complete is it now? It's great to try this wine with you, because we only made 100 cases of it. Very, very limited production. So I haven't had it as many times as probably the other ones. Yeah, exactly. So makes me happy. It's a good wine. If you get this, 2009 Saints and Sinners, you'll be happy.
Look for it.
So, now we have some Pinots.
Beautiful. Actually, we have a red glass.
Yeah. I'm going to put the corks back in these just because I've got...
So besides the grapes you're already using to make wines, if you could pick any grape in the world, bring it into the valley, and have it grow to your standards to make wine, what would you pick?
Gruner Veltliner.
Just like that. Not even a hesitation.
Not even a hesitation.
Why?
I love Gruner Veltliner. I could drink Gruner Veltliner every day. And there's very few grapes I could drink every day. I'm an ADD person anyway, so, and I get bored with the same thing. That's why I make so many damn Viogniers. It's just, I like the raciness of that grape. It goes with everything.
Great food wine.
It's low in alcohol, so you can drink a lot of it and not really feel like you're going overboard. And I don't think I've ever had a hangover from Gruner Veltliner. I've had plenty of Pinot Noir hangovers, I will say that.
Is there anybody that's experimenting with that?
There's a Gruner Veltliner vineyard somewhere in Los Olivos, and a friend of mine is making some wine from those. So, but I haven't tried it yet, so I reserve my judgment. Okay, I drink a lot of Austrian Gruner, and so that standard's pretty darn high. But yeah, That would be the grape.
I've been hearing a lot of things about the Happy Canyon AVA out here. Is that something that you've looked into at all for experimenting, doing any new things for your winery?
I used to buy Viognier from Happy Canyon.
Oh, really?
That was where the first hard clone Viognier for the Santa Ynez Valley was coming from.
But at that point, it wasn't actually the AVA Happy Canyon, or was
it had not become.
Not been established
it
yet.
had not been established yet, and the reason I quit buying that fruit, I would still buy that fruit, but they started pricing themselves out of the market for me. Because to me, that produced a wine that was a $20 bottle of wine, $20, $25 bottle of wine, not a $50 bottle of wine.
Right.
And so I just, what they wanted for the grapes and what I was trying to deliver to the customer did not meet. And so I was lucky enough to find Curtis, who had taken cuttings from that Happy Canyon vineyard and was able to get it at a better price that I thought the consumer, Viognier is one of those things people need to come into it slowly. You can't just start somebody off with a $60 bottle of wine and expect them to really understand that right away unless it's just blow your mind good. And even then, enough experience with California Viognier would make me as a consumer go, I'm not spending that kind of money on something that's going to be big and flabby and not go with my food.
Right.
So that was, for me, that Santa Ynez is sort of that intro to Cold Heaven at an affordable price. So people felt more comfortable trying the more expensive wines and the other single vineyards that I make.
Do you find that the perceived value of red wine versus white wine is such that people are more inclined to fork out more money for a bottle of red wine versus a bottle of white wine? Or from your experience, is that a non-issue?
That's a funny thing. I think look, my white wine outsells my red wine 10 to 1 easily. But I've also
I think you're more known for it.
I'm more known for it, exactly. But what I've noticed is there is a trend out there that people are drinking more red wine.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know. I was privy to some marketing information that a company did out of New York, and they were advising a winery they needed to cut back their production of red wine by X percent, and it was a good amount, like 20-30%, and make more white wine. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting, because for years, and when we get to the Syrah, you'll understand, for years I used to be so envious. Everybody had red wine. They would get to me and they go, you don't have any red wine? And I'm going to the next table. And I'd be like the lone, all I have are these 2 Viogniers. And then, of course, the one year that I sell out of Viognier, I had a real short crop, didn't have very much, sold it out, and had red wine. People would come up to the table and there's no Viognier? I was like, there is no pleasing you people. So I'm trying to, Cold Heaven will become actually more of a Pinot Noir house in the coming years. There's just simply not enough Viognier planted to do the things I want to do. And with Pinot Noir, there's so much great Pinot Noir planted around here.
There's a lot of fruit.
Plus, Pinot Noir is really my favorite grape of all time.
That's one of my favorites as well.
It's so different. It can be so different from producer to producer, and it's just drinks so easily and goes with so many more foods than your average red wine. So this particular wine is, I make 2 different ones, but we're sold out of the Nevertell, which is a single vineyard from.
Shot a little label there. Little wine porn.
And this is Makepeace. Now, we made more Makepeace than we did Nevertell in 2009. Makepeace is actually a blend of 2 different AVAs, 2 separate vineyards, one from Santa Maria, one from Santa Rita Hills. So 50-50. So what you get when you smell it, that spiciness, that bright cherry, the strawberry, that's Santa Maria. Whereas in the mouth, when you get more into the velvety feel, that's it's going to be that ceremony house. Oh, it's corked.
She's going to. I didn't want to say anything.
The one wine I poured for you. That's.
I'm not picking up any of those.
We'll have to open another one of those.
That's okay.
Well, I haven't had very many of that. So
What is it?
Next.
1 in 10 to 1 in 20. That's a different.
Normally I'd be embarrassed about that, but I've had so few of those.
We could just skip to the.
Yeah.
This is the Syrah.
Yeah, let's do that. But we're going to need to seriously
Rinse those.
Rinse those. And you know what? Where's that yellow label?
Yeah, actually, I was in Wally's in LA, a wine store, and they actually, it's a good place to buy Cold Heaven because they sell it there if you're in LA. And I was actually, when you're talking about the prices of some of the white wines, I couldn't believe how many above $50 like Sauvignon Blanc they have on the shelf.
Oh yeah, Sauvignon
It's almost
Blanc.
like a trend right now, like high-end Sauv Blanc, and I was kind of surprised when I saw that.
I've noticed that too, actually, and have you tried a lot of these? Have you tried any of these?
Not a lot of the high-end ones, really.
It's left me wanting.
Yeah.
I say.
I mean, I found a lot of great Sauvignon Blancs that are like around the $20 price range. Not just from California, but other parts of the world. And it's like, sometimes I'm like, well, it's kind of pricey. I mean, or if it's just going to be, grassy, the same kind of characteristics, and not be anything really extraordinary.
I think what's happening is a lot more people are doing it in French oak. That's the only reason I could ever understand the
price hike.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're gonna take that one away. Well, what a rare. We never
This is
have.
a real wine show here.
We never have. Hey, cork tan
This happens.
It's the I prefer cork. I'm your poster girl, cork council. I like the old-fashionedness of it. I like pulling a cork. But you know what? As a winemaker, when I'm at a tasting and I really need to open wine fast, I love the fact that I have that corkscrew. I mean, not corkscrew, but screw cap. Because it says two different things about a wine. And I don't, this whole idea of putting high-end wines in screw caps, that's knock yourselves out, but I'm not going to buy it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they look at a wine that has a screw cap on it, there's an immediate stigma in terms of price, in terms of how high quality, how high price, where is this wine falling with other wines. And also the fact of, I think people perceive it as a wine that's not meant to be aged if it has a screw cap.
Right, and I know that there are some higher end wines that do it, but like I said, it's just not something that moves me to want to pick up those wines or buy those wines. Now, I am wildly interested in the glass tops.
I've had one, Calera. Calera Pinot Noir. I've had it.
Calera's got glass tops now? I'm so jealous.
Yeah.
Damn him. I'm going to have to beat Josh up and ask him where he gets those.
It's the only one I've had so far.
Because I've had a lot of German Rieslings and Austrian ones. I've come across those. But to me, that has that old-fashionedness, something that wine is...
The romantic part, I think, to me, it's something romantic about pulling the cork out of a bottle of wine, too.
Right, and there's a certain... I like that tradition. And, in the next sentence, I'll tell you how I hate tradition, but there's certain things about tradition I really like. So the one you have in your glass now is the 2005 Second Scent. And Second Scent is envy in the 7 deadly scents. And the reason I chose envy was because I was always so envious that everybody else had red wine and I only had white wine. And it wasn't because I thought you should envy this wine. It was more of an homage to my own feeling. But I figured at Second Sin, no one really would comprehend that it was envy and think I was being a little full of myself. And you're having the 2005, which is really what a current release for us. We do 2 years barrel, 2 years bottled before we even think about releasing it.
Neutral oak as well, or do you put any a mixture? Or?
We use probably 25 to 30% new oak on all the Syrahs. And I continue to make Syrah, even though it seems that nobody buys Syrah. But how good is this Syrah? I mean, and this is, I was just looking over, Steve Tanzer said, dare I say it, it has a European quality. And I thought, is that a bad thing? I've always thought that was a good thing.
That is a good thing, I would think.
But it's really balanced. It's got those typical violets and the meat tones that you get out of, Côte Rôtie. And actually this was, the reason that we do 2 years barrel, 2 years bottle before we even release it was I was in Hermitage, and that's what Shaw does. And I thought, you know what, that's an interesting concept, because he said, look, when those wines release, they're ready. They're not babies, they're not undrinkable, they're not rugged, they're ready.
Right.
And they'll still age, and that's what you're seeing. This is 2005, this is a 7-year-old Syrah, and it is drinking beautifully.
Yeah, the violets I totally pick up. They're very bright on the nose as well.
So this is one vineyard. It's not an AVA in Santa Barbara County. It's in Los Alamos. It's a high elevation. Even I made a 2008 Domaine de Demont Syrah from that vineyard. But we didn't hold it in bottle for 2 years, so it's just real. It's a 2008, and it is
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that vineyard produces really intense grapes because they come in looking like Pinot Noir. Syrah grapes are much bigger than Pinot Noir grapes. Pinot Noir this year I could fit in the palm of my hand for a cluster, whereas a cluster of Syrah would sort of engulf my hand and continue down. But really small berries like Pinot Noir. So when you had that ratio of surface area to juice, meaning the smaller the berry, the bigger the surface area, the volume, you get this intensity.
Great acid on this one, by the way.
And in the 2003 drinks great.
Wow.
So, yeah.
This is delicious.
It's delicious.
Oh man, this is really good.
I know, and there's like, but what's so funny is people want to pass over Syrah. And, okay, guess what you think? What do you think the alcohol content is in this?
It's funny because that you mentioned that, because to me this wine is so light. It's not heavy, it's not syrupy, and even the mouthfeel.
But when you look at it, you know it's not Pinot.
No, for sure. But I mean, without you, now, I know it's a trick question, but before I would say like this is like, 13.5% maybe. I would say this is not like a high alcohol.
It's not a trick question, and you're really close. It's a 13.7 alcohol. So, but that's a real rarity in Syrah.
Welcome back. Sorry about the little camera malfunction. We were talking about the difference of the alcohol level in the Syrah and the Pinot Noir, and I think it's the Australians didn't really help the whole cause too much. The whole Shiraz, these big syrupy fruit bombs that are 15-16% alcohol. And I think there are a lot of producers in California who kind of saw, there's like a marketing trend. People are making money off these wines. Let's pump up our wines and get on this bandwagon.
I wouldn't blame Australia for that, actually.
No.
I think Australia just has it's very warm. I think it's part of the climate. Their Shiraz doesn't taste like California Shiraz. Or Syrah. Sorry. I think really the people behind that, and I'm probably going to regret saying this, has been a lot of the wine critics. Big glossy magazine that we all know it's oversized.
Parker.
It doesn't fit into your magazine rack, and no, Parker actually does, but Parker hates acid. His new guy I hear is a lot better, so I have never submitted anything to Parker.
Is that Antonio Golini? Golini, I think. Antonio Golini.
Yes, exactly. No, I hear he's very good. And my deal is I don't submit any publication unless you've been to the winery and understand what it is for a winemaker to make wine, that particular winemaker. After that, I will send you all you want. And
So I'll have one of these at my doorstep.
well, that's why I always send a Tanzer. Tanzer,
Yeah.
has personally tasted with me, and his guy comes every year and tastes, and for some reason has an extra honing device that always comes on the day I'm bottling. So I'm highly stressed. But what's interesting for me, because I've been making Pinot Noir from the Santa Rita Hills for the past couple of years, and even working to keep the sugar levels down, picking early, I'm getting more alcohol in my Pinots than I am Syrahs. Yes, if you never tell it was here, but the thing about it is that trick question you thought I was trying to pull on you, I could do with that one. And this one's, this is a 14%.
Great spices.
And that's that Santa Maria. Santa Maria. And of the two wines, this is the more, if somebody who drinks more of a Burgundy European palate for Pinot Noir is probably going to go for this more. The Nevertell, more of your people who like that fruity California style. But, we're never going to purposely produce fruit bombs. That's not the goal. And high alcohol wines, I don't want to add water. I don't want to add a bunch of stuff to the wine. I want to have the wines be as natural as possible. That being said, I'm not doing single vineyards on the Pinots.
Well, it's interesting with Pinots because I've had some blends from certain won't-be-named wineries that their cheaper blends, to me, are better than some of their more expensive single vineyard Pinots.
I think so too, because I think you get a more balanced wine when you blend.
And I think compared to Viognier, I think there's different characteristics I think that you're trying to preserve as a personality with that wine, where Pinot Noir, it's a little bit different. You can actually get more out of it sometimes by actually blending those parts together and getting more out of it than the sum of the parts.
Well, and I'll tell you why, part of the reason I believe that there's such a vast difference in Pinot Noirs versus, say, Viognier. I only know of a handful of Viognier clones, whereas Pinot Noir has a huge array of clonal selection, and those clones make a huge difference. For me, when I started up the Pinot Noir program for Cold Heaven, the whole idea was that, okay, I love Pinot Noir, but what clones do I like best? What out of those clones, where do I like the sites best? So I really thought I need about 5 years of experimentation with vineyards. Some of them I like and continue to work with, some of them go away. Maybe some of them just price themselves out of where I want to be. I don't want to make only $50 Pinot Noir.
Right.
And I'm not trying to make something precious. If I hit upon that, great. But really, I want something that people like and enjoy, and it's affordable. And the whole snobbery thing is not me. But that being said, right now I'm in a lot of experimentation phase with Pinot Noir. So I've kept the 2010s are all here. We don't talk about our vineyard sites. I mean, here this one's secret. Yeah, we don't talk about our vineyard site, and that's we call that particular vineyard secret. But you can see we've got a clonal selection here, and we keep them all. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I wish you'd been here because I was tasting every single barrel separately, noting what clonal selection it was, and so that as I progress making Pinot Noir in 5 years, hopefully I'll be able to say, ta-da, it's this vineyard. But I'm also at a point where, as a winemaker, where you work with a vineyard that doesn't have a name, you're the one out on the road talking about them, and you get you come back, and then suddenly 10 other winemakers want your fruit, and you're contacting your sources, and they'll pay more, and the vineyard's like, either you're going to pay this amount or we're going to sell it to somebody else. I'm done spending my marketing dollars promoting a vineyard site that's not going to work with me and stay true to me.
Sure.
Unless it's a family-owned vineyard. Buy more Le Bon Clément.
You heard it. It's also, I pick up a real nice smokiness on the aromas of this wine, and then I really like the tart cherry, the finish of this wine. It's just a wonderful tartness. I love it. It's like sour candy.
Well, that's definitely that Santa Maria. This wine has been dominated by Santa Maria.
It's a wonderful wine.
I thank you. I really like it. The Never Tell is so different. It looks so dark. In fact, I put up some pictures on Facebook where I had wines out, and I'm like, which one's the Syrah, which one's the Pinot? And it was funny because the first person to guess was a guy who works for Chris Curran and Bruno D'Alfonso, and he has worked with me over the years, and a good friend of mine, and he knew exactly what it was.
Wow.
And I think it's because you can go to school to learn things, but experience teaches you nuances that you can never get out of a textbook.
Oh, for sure.
So.
Wow. Okay, well, I guess we should probably wrap up before we have any more technical malfunctions here.
I think we're out of wine, too.
I know.
So,
the question I wanted to leave you with, essentially, is when are you the most happy as a winemaker? When are you the happiest really?
Probably the happiest I am as a winemaker is when I am having food that makes my wine sing. Because I think one of the main reasons I got into wine business, other than loving wine, is I really love good food. I like to cook. I'm more motivated towards food than just about anything else. I think it's because my mother was perpetually on a diet in my childhood, and I never got fed well. But when you make something that just goes together, that for me is like this shining point as a winemaker, because you've finally gotten to the point where the chemistry and your environment and everything's coming together, because we can sit here and drink these wines one after another separately on their own, but the reality is the consumer is not doing that really. They're having a bottle of wine with dinner, they're pulling a bottle of wine for lunch, whatever. They're having it with food. So when they have an experience with food and wine that really brings out the wine, that to me is the best achievement.
Yeah,
I like being in the vineyard a lot. I do, except when I actually have to work in the vineyard. I like to walk in the vineyard, but when you have to prune and
do the hard work.
On a hot day, you're dying in the heat. That's just not it's not the romance that you imagine it to be.
So if you want to check out Cold Heaven online, coldheavencellars.com. Social media, Facebook, Twitter.
Cold Heaven has a fan page. Morgan Clendenen will consider you as a friend.
We'll put the links down below, and if you're good, we'll see what happens.
I'm getting to the point where I'm sort of like feeling like I want to simplify my life and not have two separate pages, but I'm more inclined to say crazier things on my own page than I am the Cold Heaven fan book page. And then, come to the winery, and, JC is so great, and when I'm here, I like taking people on surprise odysseys in the back of the cellar and tasting things out of barrel and turning people on to different things.
That's very cool. Very cool. Thank you so much
for
having me here.